It's
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this 8/28/20 broadcast of Unbreaking Science. I'm your host, Dr. James Lyons-Weiler, coming to you live from the WWDNYK studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Today, I have a special guest who has been trying to get me on her show for an interview, and for various technical reasons, et cetera, she's um, overtasked, overburdened like all the rest of us, and our schedules are not matching up. It just turned out to be more convenient for her to interview me. So we're flipping roles today, and please help me welcome Tia Severino. How you doing, Tia?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So
Wonderful.
we have a lot to talk about today, and
We do.
I want to hand you over the mantle of interviewee, so that this is your kind of platform. But first, you brought something up in the pre-show, the pre-game that we should definitely talk about first. So let's get to that first.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's kind of a sad story. We have a new angel baby. Her name is Gabriella Love. She passed away 2 days ago at the age of 7 days old. And it's a really tragic story. Um, Mom, this is her fifth child, had the baby unexpectedly at home. Grandfather helped deliver the baby. Baby was fine, healthy, but mom wanted to make sure that, the birth was recorded and that she was examined and made sure that the baby was okay. So she went to the hospital where they looked the baby over and basically began to start to try and get her to vaccinate, which this mom had seen vaxxed. She had already seen a seizure in her oldest child after a vaccine, and had after seeing vax decided no more vaccines for any of her babies, and so she was not going to vaccinate this baby. So when they started to push her and she said no, they turned around and said, we think that she has a heart murmur. And so they held the baby overnight and proceeded to bully the mom, put the mom into a very stressful situation, and the mother was holding her ground. They called CPS. CPS came in. The bullying continued. She finally relented, allowed them to vaccinate the baby. And then, for some reason, which I'm still not clear on, they gave the baby an MRI. And so this is just, I don't even understand the protocol here, why they would do this, but they did. And then they finally did release the mom with the baby. She took the baby home. The baby was unconsolable and finally cried herself to sleep. And 2 hours later, mom went to check on her and she was gone. So I found out about this the same day it happened, which is a blessing because I was able to speak to them about the proper preservation of tissues, the importance of legal representation, the importance of having a private autopsy done to determine the actual cause of death. And, all of these things take money. So we really need to help this family. They need legal representation. They need, beyond burial costs, they need money to pay for attorneys and a private autopsy. So
So
this is
this
a
is the
call out.
Hathaway and Rakes family. You just told me this pre-game, and right now the fundraiser says burial costs, but there's more. Let's go to the fundraiser here. There's $700 raised to bury this poor baby, this beautiful little baby. But like you said, there's going to be serious costs with respect to the family's response to this. So I would encourage, we'll share the link. It's tinyurl.com/baby rakes, BABYRAKES. So let's see what we as a community can do to get behind this family and give them some love. If somebody's watching, please find the URL and type the tinyurl.com/baby rakes, BABYRAKES, right there in the thread, and let's hope that this family can find some peace. This issue of vaccine injury um, causes me great consternation, great pause, and it certainly is a motivator.
Well, you know, I think most of us, when we hear about things like this happening, the big question that goes through your mind is, well, what could the cause be? Like, what by what mechanisms can a newborn infant, expire after vaccination? So what we're talking about here with this particular instance is a hepatitis B vaccine, vitamin K, and which is not a vitamin, it's a synthetic. And then there is the issue of the MRI, which was, we believe, done with dye contrast. So there's multiple layers here. It's not just the vaccines. But as a scientist, and I don't know if you can answer this question, is there a mechanism by which death can occur in a newborn infant after being given this slew of chemicals and invasive procedures?
So, Tia, as you know, the outlay on this is that people exist in this world that would look at, an exposure like vaccination because it's happening in so many different families. This one child was exposed and then passed on. They say correlation doesn't equal causation, so we have the temporal correlation. To determine causality, you have to have the exposure happen first and then the outcome. So they
Right.
dismiss that by saying, "Oh, it's probably just by chance. Something else. This baby was going to pass on or be injured anyway, in spite of the vaccine or something." I don't know how you become injured without the exposure, but the point being, there are myriad ways that I've argued in the cases in vaccine court where I'm an expert, and I offer expert testimony. And it all depends. I style my arguments on the basis of the autopsy, on where the tissue is inflamed, basically. What kind of infiltrating cells do we see in the heart if it involves something that there was a heart failure? Um,
Right.
and then I go to the literature and I try to see if there are vaccines like this vaccine of the same type or similar enough that have the same components that in the past, were shown to have an increased, risk of this outcome or enough case studies. As you well know, the problem is that there's too many potential adverse events and there's too little truly rigorous studies on vaccine injury. You need experiments. The only way science can discern causality is through experiment. So the observational studies that they do, the vaccine manufacturers, by they I mean the vaccine manufacturers and the CDC, they're focused on um, demonstrating efficacy first. They use experiment for efficacy, but then they go to observational studies for safety, which allows them to squish, change, manipulate the study design and
Mm-hmm.
the method of data analysis to get the desired result. And the desired result, of course, is that they couldn't find any adverse events associated with it. So it's a really tall order. And people would say that, that it should be a tall order because you're making what they would consider an extraordinary claim. I just had somebody write to me and say, "Hey, I'm in this debate with this doctor, and they say that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence." And they asked for a response from me, and I said, "Tell them I said this. Fine, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Then do the right study that provides that type of evidence."
Mm-hmm.
Because there's never been a vax on vax study of the entire a randomized, double-blinded, gold standard, placebo-controlled study of purely unvaccinated versus purely vaccinated, or totally vaccinated children. And until we see that study, this argument's going to go on over and over and over again. We're going to see babies die. We're going to see families devastated, until sometime in the future when we win the argument and somebody finally does, the right kind of study. And we
Right.
will win that argument one day. We will, absolutely.
So I hear a lot of talk about cytokine storm. Can
Hmm.
you help me understand, or maybe help the viewers understand what are they talking about when they say cytokine storm?
Okay, so cytokines are signaling molecules that cells use to talk to each other. So when a cell dies due to a particular kind of cell death, if it's under a viral attack or if it's cancer, it unleashes proteins that are called cytokines, and these cytokines elicit an immune response. A cytokine storm is something that happens when there's a runaway uh, effect, so that you get a positive feedback loop among the cytokines that signal. And the cytokines that we're talking about are like interleukin 6, TNF alpha, and even people who don't know biochemistry and they've never had advanced courses, or they wouldn't know a biological pathway if it hit them in the face. They're starting to send these articles to me and say, I'm seeing TNF alpha and IL-6 everywhere. It's in the cytokine storm of, you know, coronavirus. It's in autism. Why are these signals appearing after vaccine injury? I see them in vaccine injury cases. In studies of what goes wrong when the immune system goes wrong, and it's part of this you know disaster outcome where you have a runaway positive feedback loop. Um, and now we're starting to see people that are dying, or not dying, sorry, but that are experiencing uh, instances of what look to be almost like anaphylaxis. They're young women, and they're attributing it to coronavirus, and they end up with um, positional orthostatic, tachycardia syndrome, where they if they lay a certain way, they pass out, right? They end up with arthralgia and myalgias and these whole body aches and pains they can't really. And the news articles that cover it say that this is a coronavirus effect on this young woman, and yet nobody bothers to say, did you get your HPV shot over the past 4 months, right? So coronavirus might absorb a lot of this in terms of the alleged causality. The level of evidence of attributing causality to something like adverse events from coronavirus is really, really low. The call for the level of evidence for causality from a vaccine injury is really, really high. And that's not how causality works. You can't change the level of evidence in an ad hoc manner in science and say, I will accept this level of evidence for causality if it involves this factor, and then the next day go, oh, well, I'm going to lower it because it's a virus, and we know that viruses cause autoimmunity. We know the viruses can trigger MS. We know the viruses can trigger this, but there's a double standard, is what I'm saying. And so there's nothing scientific about vaccine risk denialism. It's cruel. It's sick. It's absolutely unwarranted. And the people that want to you know, have fun and go online and make fun of people that say that they think that their child got sick or died from vaccines, or that they themselves suffered from a vaccine, and say, it's not possible. It's only 1 in a million, which is an incorrect rate. That's a misquoted rate. Well, what if that person is the 1 in a million? You jerk. That's a
Right.
jerk for somebody to say, well, it's not you because it's only 1 in a million. Right? Well, there's so many ways that a vaccine could potentially harm a person. There's so many proteins that match human proteins in viruses and bacteria. And the closer the organism is to the human, to humans, like Lyme disease, the spirochetan Lyme, or a bacterium like pertussis, the
Hmm.
closer they are in the evolutionary tree to humans, the more similar the proteins are. And then there's some viruses that are really good at picking up human genes, protein coding genes. So they start expressing like proteins that look like human proteins. So, if there was one gift that I could give to the world right now, would be that we could return to rational discourse about causality in vaccines, and people would stop losing their freaking heads over it. If there's a
Right.
problem with vaccines, then let's address it, and then let's fix it.
Well, I agree, but you know that they're never gonna. Uh-oh, I lost sound.
You're still here.
Oh, okay. You dropped out for me.
We
I don't
hear
know if
you.
it happened for anyone else, but I hear you now.
So you were saying?
I was going to say that there. because I thought you paused for a minute. I was going to say that they don't ever want to discover anything that would be evidence that they know that these things cause harm. It's just beyond their. I think honestly, at this point, it's culpability, and they know that if they discover any function by which vaccines can harm, that they then become culpable in the
Absolutely, absolutely.
cover up of it.
No, you're exactly right. So I was on one case, the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, where the HHS doctor actually, and Tony Bark was an expert on this one as well, where the HHS doctor actually, you know, said that asthma is not autoimmunity, and that he had never heard anyone say that asthma involves any autoimmunity. And so it's so easy to go to PubMed and find this entire literature on the autoimmunological
Right.
basis of asthma. In fact, they want to, there's a group of scientists and medical professionals who want to change asthma and put it into a syndrome of autoimmune, you know, um, autoimmune conditions of the airway or something like that. And
Hmm.
it's really clear at the molecular level that there's autoimmunity. All of the hallmarks of autoimmunity are present in asthma and in severe asthma. And this person, just on the basis of the fact that they're an HHS expert with a white coat, can just wave their arm and say, this is not autoimmunity. They're like manifesting baloney out of the air, and didn't know that I was on the other side of that. So like 70% of my, reply to this person was telling them they're wrong, giving them an education on the literature. Here's about 100 studies or whatever. And then the rest of it, was castigating them for plagiarizing websites in their testimony on aluminum. So they put zero effort into it. They think it's like a joke or something. They're not taking it seriously. The
Hmm.
NVICP, in my opinion, is absolute fraud. I think this family. I'm not giving legal advice, but I think any family, would be a waste of their time to go to try to seek compensation. They don't want to get their hopes up. What they want to do is they want to, take good care of the people that they love, put their time, energy, and effort to healing, and put their time, energy, and effort into raising vaccine risk awareness, because they can just sit there and hope and hope and hope. But there's so many, the cards are stacked against them. I was actually, Tia, offered a bribe by a special master to change my testimony in
What?
NVICP. Yep, yep, that's exactly
Well,
right.
okay. Well, so hold on a second. Can we? Because you mentioned aluminum, and that's another factor in this, right?
Yeah,
So vitamin K has what, 500 micrograms
not that
of
much. No,
aluminum?
it's much smaller than that. My
How
understanding
many?
was lower than, I don't know. I don't remember how much, but it's smaller than that. We could look it up,
Okay.
but okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, I.
We don't have to
Yeah.
redo the
So
we don't have to redo the studies that I did. So we actually put the table of the aluminum together for all the vaccines, and that's one of the things I want to talk
okay.
about. My reaction to these abuses of the human population by the pharma corporations, is to do science. And so we have our third aluminum study that's been submitted for peer review. It is almost accepted for peer review. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but I want to show you what we're doing. In the first two studies, we looked at whether there was a pediatric dose limit for aluminum in vaccines at all.
Okay.
And that's the first study. And we found that there wasn't. So we determined what one would look like. And it was about 14 micrograms per kilogram for a newborn. Hepatitis B has
Okay.
250 micrograms, and that works out to be 15 times more than it should. So the Ricketson et al. Study, um, the first IPAC study, focused on determining what a pediatric dose limit. The McFarland study, which was published, focused on how often children under the CDC's schedule are in fact in aluminum toxicity. So what
Okay.
percentage of their days? And it turns out in the first year of life, in that study, we found 70% of their days, they're in the first 7 months of life, children are in aluminum toxicity. And then we also found in the first 2 years of life, 1 out of every 4 days, children are aluminum toxicity. So then, but that study, Tia, didn't adjust for the fact that when a baby's born, their kidney is only, um, 20% that of a 2-year-old. So
Right.
we redid that modeling, and we looked at in a new study that's under review. It's about to be accepted. We asked the question: what happens if somebody starts vaccinating late because of a court ruled in favor of vaccination, or what happens if there's a custody situation, or if they
Right.
delayed vaccination due to coronavirus and then started vaccination again. And we have a lot of use cases in this study. I'm just going to show you one. This is an 18-month-old. This is a result from the preliminary results. They're not peer reviewed. They have been peer reviewed, but it's not accepted yet. But the black bar here is the aluminum toxicity, the percentage of days in aluminum toxicity for the CDC schedule. If you just start back on the schedule, the yellow is the CDC catch-up schedule. So in this case, the CDC catch-up schedule is more toxic than just going back and entering the schedule where you missed it. The
Wow.
green is the CDC schedule using low aluminum options for vaccines, and the blue is an alternative schedule that we proposed that skipped aluminum-containing vaccines and spread it never gave the children more than one aluminum containing vaccine per day. So we also looked at, just briefly, um, let's see, how do I navigate here? We also looked at children that were delayed due to this one right here, use case number 5. Here's a child that was vaccinated until 3 months of age with vaccination restart following a 6-month hiatus. And this is a situation when there's, due to social distancing, such as is going on with coronavirus. And here also, the CDC catch-up schedule has more toxicity, the percentage of days that that baby is going to be in aluminum toxicity. So, that's our response to the problem of vaccine injury denialism and risk denialism, and the fact that the CDC does not have an understanding, a published understanding of anything like a pediatric dose limit, is to do the science that's necessary and do the calculations ourselves and
Right.
publish them. Well, guess what? The people who peer reviewed this third paper, they gave us such glowing reviews. It was embarrassing. It was truly embarrassing. I was so proud of my team, Graham McFarland, Elaine Lajali, and myself. It was just really super. So the message is getting out there. I mean, when we first did our first study, the reviewers said that they congratulated us on being bold enough to take on the FDA. I mean, why is that bold? It's science. You don't have to be bold in an open society to ask questions. So I'm not afraid.
I know, but it's a different climate, isn't it? I mean,
Oh,
anything that challenges the allopathic model for the last over 100 years has been, you know, the whoever brings that message is ostracized. So I just looked up the aluminum for vitamin K. It's 100 micrograms. I think
okay,
it's actually HPV that has 500 micrograms of aluminum.
okay,
But if we're talking about one vitamin K shot and then a hepatitis B shot, that's 350 micrograms of aluminum that this baby got.
yeah, that's a big
And
problem.
and you just said 14 micrograms should be a
Yeah, that's the estimate. And now our third study actually showed when you adjust for the renal insufficiency I was talking about, where kids don't have
mhm,
working kidneys on the first day of life,
right,
it turns out that kids on the schedule are the safe limit on day of 1 of life is about 0, and our new
right.
estimate is about 0, and so kids are in aluminum toxicity 100% of their days in our revised estimate in the third study because of renal insufficiency. And so, they're not 2-year-olds that have fully functioning kidneys. So this is every time that there's a lie or a policy program that's out there that is founded on a pack of lies, IPAC is doing more science. We just submitted the Vaxxed Unvaxxed study of Dr. Paul Thomas's pediatric practice, where we had, thousands of patients who were variably vaccinated. There was a lot of variation in the patients in how they were vaccinated, and 560 or so unvaccinated. and we looked at the how many office visits these kids have related to these health conditions that we're all interested in, instead of just the diagnosis. So it turns out when you look at the number of office visits that kids have related to, say, asthma, it's a much more powerful measure. So we're actually going to change vaccine safety science. Our paper concludes, I hope it's accepted, but our paper concludes that every observational study going forward should not use odds ratios on incidence because of diagnosis, just the how many people had autism, how many people had asthma. It's not going to tell you as much as, you know, how many times kids who are vaccinated have to go to the doctors for asthma or eczema, how many times the kids have to go for, for so we changed the science. And if
Mhm.
this could be a landmark paper where it's called relative incidence of office visits as opposed to the incidence of just incidence. And we, odds ratios are weak using incidence. So, we continuously react to the problems in science by doing better science, by showing that there's different ways of doing it. This makes the denialism irrelevant, right? So I really don't care if the paradigm is that, well, we're going to be ostracized, because
Right.
as they continue to add vaccines to the schedule, there's just more and more and more scientists are going to figure this out and say, wait a minute, this is a real problem. And so, if it wasn't me, it would be somebody else. There were other scientists that came before me: Brian Hooker, Chris Exley, Chris Shaw. For years and years, people working on this, and I was oblivious about it. Well, now, I think the tide is changing. I just read an article in a major outlet. It was something like the Atlantic or something that said mainstream education education in medicine has to change. They need to pay attention to environmental factors. They need to pay attention to social factors. Okay, so rather than just say everything's genetic, or here's a pill and by the way, call me doctor, right? So there's
Right.
a big change afoot when it comes to people looking at medicine. I think people are starting to take the problems that allopathic medicine brings to us quite seriously. I'm very optimistic we're going to make a dent here.
Well, just in your thoughts. Oh, lost sound again.
You're here.
Oh, okay. I see. It looks like you're talking, but I'm not hearing. And maybe it's my eyes playing tricks on me because I can't see because I don't have my glasses on. Oh, maybe this will. Not really. I'm turning into an old woman. What, in your opinion, if you have one, would be the okay? So the baby gets 350 micrograms of aluminum. How would that aluminum being injected into the bloodstream, how could that potentially cause the baby to pass? I mean, does
There's
it get
just so
into the
many ways.
brain? What's
Aluminum's a potent neurotoxin. We know this. I mean, just go to PubMed and type in aluminum neurotoxicity. Type in. It's
right?
also an immunotoxin. So, its job is to, Here's the problem. People say that aluminum's safe in vaccines, but they're talking about is plasma clearance. There's a study of infants hepatitis B that they took blood plasma before and after the vaccine, and 24 hours after the vaccination, it's like there's no aluminum in the blood. We can't detect it, so it must be safe. But they never measured the urine. And
Right.
they never measured the actual exiting of the body. So aluminum's not soluble, so they're not going to find it in plasma. They're going to find it adhered to tissue. That's its job. And when it adheres to tissue, it kills cells. That's its job. It kills cells, and by cell death, then it elicits an immune response because there's cellular debris. The white blood cells, the macrophages, pick up the cellular debris, and then they travel and move it all around the body, and it can go everywhere. So the point is, you can develop a serious localization, and that serious localization of a bolus of aluminum can do immense damage locally. So you can get an inflamed heart, inflamed kidney. This is my scientific opinion, not medical. Okay,
Right.
so there's many ways, and people like to argue, well, aluminum doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, so there goes your problem with neurotoxicity, and yet that does not explain the following. Chris actually found aluminum in the brain. We,
Right.
that makes the blood-brain barrier argument irrelevant. It's in the brain. So it can enter the
Right.
brain. If you find it in the brain, it's in the brain. Amyloid, people don't know this, but amyloid, as in Alzheimer's amyloid protein, amyloid
Hmm.
is part aluminum. That's the chemical constituency. So we've been looking,
Interesting.
this has been known since 1985. So we know that aluminum is a problem. There's no doubt about it. And what we need to do as a people, as a movement, as a population, is we need to stop wondering how we're going to win the argument and understand that science, they already know this. When I wrote this
Right.
book, The Environmental Genetic Causes of Autism, and I read 3,000 studies for this book, and I closely read 2,000, and it's a fantastic compendium of what autism looks like from a neurological, immunological standpoint. There's not enough in here about the gut, right? But from getting the toxins in, once they're in, well, you got a leaky gut, you're letting all kinds of toxins in.
Right.
This is the key reference. The guy who wrote the foreword to this book was Richard Fry, and we had a conversation after he read the book. He called me and he said, "This is such a wonderful resource. It's so detailed. You've worked out the mechanisms, okay, and what's going on in autism, and I understand autism a lot more." Well, this is the guy who did most of the studies on autism that I cited in the book. I mean, he's an amazing marathon scientist. He's just incredible, Richard Fry. He was at uh, well, he just recently went to Arizona State University, so he's just an amazing, amazing researcher. I said to him, well, listen, Richard, we got to get all these neurobiologists, uh, neurosurgeons, pediatricians, um, uh, people dealing with the nervous central nervous system and the autonomous nervous system. We need to tell them that this is a problem. And he said the most devastating words. He said, they already know.
Right.
So we need to stop acting like we need to win the argument. We need to call them out on their BS and their denialism. It doesn't. It makes no sense, and that's why they don't engage with me. If you notice, there's not a lot of people that come at me online, social media, right? They don't come at me on Twitter. They don't come at me on Facebook. They just kind of let me do my own thing because they lose every argument with me that they try to have. So I mean, it's like shooting ducks in a barrel when you have the scientific background, and we have it in spades. We have so much evidence. If people are looking for a good resource, it's free online at jameslyons-weiler.com. There's two articles called "The Biological Mechanisms of Vaccine Injury." I wrote those
Okay.
articles. And jameslyons-weiler.com this month reached 1.1 million readers. So we're starting
Wow.
to get out there.
Bravo. Bravo.
All
Okay,
right.
well let's move this party along. We were originally going to be talking about PCR testing, and so with the coronavirus,
Sure.
it's a big mess, really. CDC can't figure out what they want to do, from to sending out contaminated tests to uh, wanting to test everybody that had been in contact with anybody that had coronavirus, to this recent backpedaling this week of no, only get tested if you are symptomatic or you've been in continued exposure to someone with coronavirus. They can't seem to figure out what they want to do, but yet they are full steam ahead. They just had a meeting earlier this week. I sat and listened to them, presentations from Moderna and Pfizer, and discussions of who's going to get the vaccine, and how are we going to get these doses out, and it's really, really maddening. But you had some insight into these PCR tests, right? This is where they take a
Hmm.
tiny particle and amplify it. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have quite a lot of insight on it. So the preliminary chain reaction test is an RT. It means reverse transcriptase. This is where they take the RNA from an RNA source, they change it into DNA, and then they amplify it using the standard PCR uh, reaction. And I was a peer review on a research study by Singhan Lee, and I interviewed him here on Unbreaking Science. What Dr. Lee showed was that, well, the way that they're using the test, and CDC is using the test, and other corporate tests that are out there, the way it's implemented is you amplify the DNA from the RNA. You amplify the DNA and then you see if it's there by looking at a number on a machine. Right, and that's fine if you want to know if you have PCR product. But what that PCR product is really matters. That PCR product has a certain nucleotide sequence made up of A, T, C's, and G's, just like your genome. And these tests should be verified by looking at that sequence, but they don't look at the sequence. So what Dr. Lee did was he requested reference sample sets where there were sputum samples from patients that had been diagnosed with COVID-19 from New York City. They were labeled COVID-19 test positive. In other words, a PCR test, right, tested
Right.
that sample and it said these are positive for COVID-19, for coronavirus. And then he had another set of samples, and that other set of samples, they were from people that had respiratory illness, but no coronavirus was detected using the PCR test. So then he performed his own PCR analysis on those samples, successfully amplified, and then he sequenced what the product was, which is the missing step. He's in Milford,
Okay.
Connecticut. What he found was outstanding. It was infuriating, actually. 1 out of 4 of the samples that he tested were labeled wrong by the other test. Well, that test is the gold standard for CDC. So if CDC's test is getting 1 out of 4 wrong, either saying coronavirus is here when it's not, or saying coronavirus is not here when it is, then we do not have a viable testing paradigm in the United States. And in fact, Sanjay Gupta, now 3 weeks ago, was quoted, was on video. He said during an interview on CNN that he had interviewed Dr. Robert Redfield the night before, and he asked him. He said, "Dr. Redfield, what do you think we need to do in the United States to handle this coronavirus?" And he said, "Sanjay, we need a viable testing facility, capacity, or not capacity, sorry, a program." And Sanjay Gupta's reaction, which he repeated the next day, was, "You've got to be kidding me. It's August, right? So we're looking at August. I was complaining about this stuff back in February.
I
Saying,
know.
you guys
I
have to get this right. You have to get testing right. It has to be independent. It has to be private. It has to be antibody based, not this PCR stuff, because you're going to get it wrong, right?" So there's more to this testing story because, you mentioned it just a minute ago. You said, "Hey, people are out there going, we should test everybody." Well, right?
Right.
And there was a doctor on CNN, I forget her name, but she said that why wouldn't you want to get tested for coronavirus? Well, the answer for why you wouldn't want to get tested for coronavirus is because you don't know what the false positive rate is. If you test positive and you're not really positive, they're going to shut down your school. They're going to quarantine. There's 41 kids in Oklahoma that were just quarantined, and all the teachers and everybody else for 10 days, or 10 or 14 days, because of a single person testing positive in a test that we know is faulty and will give false positives.
Wow.
So this little bomb's going to go off over here. This little bomb's going to go off over there. We'll multiply that by millionfold. I call that the cost of the false positive. So one of the things that IPAC does, as I said, was whenever there's a problem with a policy or a policy statement or policy program, is we do science. I asked and answered the question, and from the beginning of an outbreak to the end of an outbreak, when 0% of the people are infected to when 100% of the people are infected, or some large number, when should we switch from symptom-directed testing to arbitrary testing? And I determined that switch point. And it assumes that your test has 99% specificity. That means that it has 1% false positives. So all of my analysis is very optimistic. We know it's worse in this situation. With even 1% false positives, you have to wait till you're 30 or 40% infected in the population before you switch to testing everybody. Otherwise, you're going to be shutting it down because the number of false positives vastly outnumber the number of true positives, the number of true negatives. Just too many people don't have the disease to make it worthwhile. So the benefit of testing is, well, in the future, you're going to prevent. No, you're doing it right now. What are you preventing if through false positives you're shutting down society right now that you don't want to have happen in the future? And people have a really hard time understanding this. It's very frustrating because it's so straightforward, right? So that paper is under peer review right now. That's a very prestigious journal, and if it passes peer review, they're going to invite me to do a special volume, a special issue in that very prestigious journal, where I would be an editor of that volume, and invite people to look at this from 360 degrees. We have to include the cost of the false positives. We can't just ignore what happens to society, what happens to a workplace, what happens to a restaurant, what happens to schools, what happens to a household if somebody tests positive, but it's a false positive. And this is not just economics. This is, there are deaths of depression. There are more suicides out in California because of shutdown in society. We have it exactly wrong. It's like the United States decided to try this new paradigm in responding to an outbreak, and we got it wrong from day one. Sweden got it right. I put it like this: Sweden is no longer killing their elderly. Sweden is no longer killing people with cardiovascular disease and diabetes with coronavirus. The United States is still killing those people because we didn't let natural immunity spread throughout the population to get herd immunity. Sweden has herd immunity. It's over for them. The nightmare's over for Sweden. We need to go to the Sweden model.
Mhm. Yep, but didn't Fauci say that he hoped that we would not have a situation where we had actual herd immunity? You know that they don't want that here, and
I know. I can't believe he actually said it.
this is why they're pushing the mask wearing everywhere, so that people are actually going to give themselves a respiratory illness, which is then going to be called COVID, whether it is or not,
That's what the
because
science
this
says.
is
If you wear a mask all day long, you're much more likely to get respiratory illness. You're exactly right. That's what the studies say.
right. And then they'll just use that to push the fear even more.
Right.
It really seems like this is a frenzy. I hate to say it's about the election, but it does seem to have some elements there where if it was not brought on because of the election, it definitely is being taken advantage of by
Yeah.
certain individuals to push the narrative that Trump's not doing enough and that, um, I believe I heard Kamala Harris say the other day that that we need to be demanding of our presidential candidates when will I be vaccinated. So that was when the light bulb moment for me was when I said, "Oh, okay, Trump knew this was coming before." I guarantee you, the minute that they said that there's a new coronavirus in China, he knew. He knew this was coming, that this
Yeah.
was going to be a political tool. If it wasn't created for that purpose, it's definitely going to be used by one. I believe that's the reason why he keeps talking about the vaccines. Hopefully, after the election, he'll back off on some of that talk. I don't know, but it definitely makes me really nervous. But it's very clear what we will get with a President Biden. We will get mandatory masks indefinitely until we have a vaccine, and then it's going to be mandatory vaccines. And something I caught on a slide on the CDC ACIP meeting the other day
Hmm.
was it was they were talking about the goals of the vaccination program, and one of the goals was um, to basically to infect I can't remember the exact words. I'm going to have to come back and I'll drop it in the comments, but it was to the effect of to elicit a systemic coronavirus infection with
A challenge
transmission.
test. Yeah, a
In other
challenge
words,
test.
infect people.
Yeah, which they should have done with animals, and they still can do with animals. See, right from the beginning in February, when they said that they were going to be skipping the animal trials, we started clamoring for them to do animal trials. They've had
Mm-hmm.
enough time to do the animal trials 10 times over. So they should challenge. We need to stand up and we need to insist that no vaccine goes to market. We need a petition to the FDA to not approve of any vaccine for emergency use authorization unless animal trials are done first. We have to stand firm on
Mm-hmm.
that point because it's wrong. It's unethical to experiment on a person who might be sick and may become much more sick and much
Right.
more likely to have enhanced disease through a program that causes pathogenic priming by vaccinating them with
Right.
the coronavirus. And we know this from all the other studies, and we've heard it time and time and time again. again, when there's a problem with science, with the scientific policy and medical practice, IPAC does science. We have a research paper that's published on pathogenic priming. In fact, we coined the phrase pathogenic priming to replace the term immune enhancement, because there's nothing about coronavirus vaccines that enhance your immunity. They actually
Mhm.
cause disease enhancement. And so the act of
Right.
vaccination followed up by an infection, you're primed by the vaccine. It's called pathogenic priming, and that's taking off. And I've got 7 or 8 or 9 different scientists using the phrase pathogenic priming. Okay, understanding what it means, and so it's actually taking root in this mainstream medicine. Mainstream science. Um, so, yeah, we that paper is in a journal of autoimmune reviews or something like that, and it sailed through peer review. We showed that every protein that's in the virus that is immunogenic, that's capable of stimulating the immune reaction, has a match to human proteins, except for one. There's one protein in the virus that doesn't have a match. The conspiracy theorists will say that's the one that China has already vaccinated all their people against, or something like that, But but there's a remarkable number of these proteins actually target the immune system. So if you get autoimmunity against a protein in your immune system, you can have problems. I don't think that this is
Right.
special to this coronavirus. I think most coronaviruses have this issue. I'm going to go back and look at data again. This may explain why the antibody based immunity is not long lasting in coronaviruses in general. There's no surprise that for COVID-19 you don't have antibodies 6 months later. We've known this since the 1960s, that this is this is the nature of our immune response to coronaviruses. It's just making a big whoop about it now so that they can cause fear that, okay, stay on lockdown, because as Fauci said, we don't want too many people to become immune because then we won't need a vaccine. Hello?
Right.
What kind of thinking? He said that out loud. I mean, you're supposed to say that quietly. Internal voice, Tony. Inside voice, right?
Right.
So we talked
Well,
about testing. Go ahead.
you brought up emergency use authorization, and that was another thing that I noticed on a slide from the CDC.
Yeah,
They can't actually, one of the conditions for emergency use authorization is that there be no other effective alternative therapies or treatments.
that's right.
Now it makes a lot more sense why they are fighting against things like hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine and ivermectin, for example.
Sure.
And hold on a second. Can you boys please stop going in and out of the door and slamming it? Thank you.
We can't hear it on this end, so
Excellent. It's really loud on my end. So, so it looks like that could be maybe one of the reasons why they're fighting so hard against, well, I mean, other than the fact that both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are off patent, extremely effective and extremely safe and extremely inexpensive
yeah.
medication. So, all that profit for all those vaccines that they're currently having their little fantasies over will go away. Like,
Yeah, no, it's really clear that there's a bias, and I'm really interested in finding out whether Fauci broke the law by commenting on the hydroxychloroquine studies that are out there as insufficient.
Mhm.
He's demanding long-term randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled studies for the safety
Right.
of something that's been administered to literally hundreds of millions, if not more than a billion people, to try to prophylactically. We know it's most effective in the early stages, and the studies that they brought on were done late stages, right? You're hospitalized,
Mhm.
which means you're really sick. If you're going to be hospitalized with coronavirus during a lockdown where they don't let anybody in the hospital, you're really sick. They think you're going to die. They give it to you. You're bound for a ventilator anyway, and they show that there's a problem, and they use a lethal dose. We had Meryl Nass right here. Dr. Meryl Nass was the one that discovered among the people who noticed that the protocol for treatment in one of the studies was a lethal dose of hydroxychloroquine, known from a study in Brazil that it was a lethal dose, and they killed the people with hydroxychloroquine. And so they attributed it to, oh, it's the hydroxychloroquine. They stopped all the studies. That sounds a lot like crime to me. It's not scientific fraud. It sounds like murder. It sounds like not medical malfeasance, not medical murder. It just sounds like murder. That's all it sounds like to
Right.
me is murder, just plain old fashioned, not manslaughter, murder. And there are other people that are saying that,
Hmm.
Dr. Mass won't say it. She thinks it's too inflammatory, but, it's time we take the kid gloves off. We have a
Right.
serious problem. If they're willing to kill people, like those three nurses, that came out in New York City and said that people are given DNRs, do not resuscitate orders, without checking with
Right.
them, without getting consent from their families. Are you kidding me? And heads need to roll for that. So the treatment that I want to point people to, and we have a nice program here at IPAC, again, where there's a problem with science and a problem with policy, while everybody else is playing around, you know, the FTC came to Dr. Brownstein up in Michigan and said, you can't interview your patients that you treated with your protocol because there's no study that has shown. That was their argument. He called me up. He was pretty upset about it. I said, so David, do a study. We have a journal. So we opened up the clinical and translational research section of Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law. And his treatment, I have an editorial right here on it, and here's his treatment. The study itself passed peer review. I put it through rigorous peer review, not mamby-pamby peer review. Um, Three independent practicing physicians looked at this, and it's a fantastic study. And I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I am going to give you guys a call to action. Just today, the IPAC website's been updated, so you can actually put in the email you can send to us, enter and send to us the email addresses of medical directors and directors of nursing homes at the ipa-knowledge.org. It's the nursing homes program. We will send those nursing homes in your state the Brownstein protocol. We'll send them the paper and the Brownstein protocol. Maybe we'll save some lives because they don't know about it. So all you have to do is go to ipa-knowledge.org, put in your name, your email, so I know that you're not a bot, and enter the email addresses there. We'll collect those emails and we'll send these people a notice from me that says, listen, there's a different way to look at this. Now, the FTC wrote back to Dr. Brownstein in full disclosure, and he told me about this, and he said, they said it's not enough. It's not a randomized clinical trial. You don't need enough to get an emergency use authorization. So I think we need to start a movement, get a petition to the FDA to approve Brownstein's protocol, give it an EUA, because as you said, there has to be no other viable treatment. Okay, so they say there's no other viable treatment. We have 107 patients in this study. Dr. Brownstein had 107 patients. Okay, we as a community have this study, and 107 patients, none of whom died. They were all given coronavirus diagnosis according to the criteria at the time, the clinical criteria. None of them died. Only one person on the core protocol was hospitalized. That's incredible compared to national statistics, where we have this huge, scary high percentage rate statistic. And they all had, many of them had comorbidities, all ages, young, old, so there should have been some problems with some of the patients here. But please do your part and get those emails. We'll put a team together and we'll send the study to the people that need to know about it. So there are viable treatments. The problem is, like you said, they go counter to the vaccine narrative, and that's not helpful.
Hmm.
It is not helpful at all to have billions of dollars at stake for that cause people. And these people also happen to have been very successful at regulatory capture. Our regulatory agencies are under duress. Our government is infiltrated and controlled by corporations. It's been this way for a long, long time.
Right. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I think the whole system, unfortunately, is going to have to come down if we're ever going to have any real change.
Well, let's talk about
Uh,
that. Let's talk about that. That's a great segue. Why why waste our energy taking down something that's broken instead of just building art for ourselves its replacement, right? And,
mhm.
and you're brilliant. You're just a brilliant interviewer because I created this school, IPAC EDU. It's an LLC. And this school is open right now. We have a course in biology people can register for. Right here, you can go, here's the syllabus, Bio 111. or Bio A, I call it. It's the same as a 111 or 150 course. This is college level biology or AP Bio. We're going to teach the fundamentals. But if you look at this, we're not only teaching biology courses, right? We're going to be teaching law courses, courses in psychology, courses in analytics, so you can learn how to analyze data, and so on. I'm just really so excited about this. This is a fantastic opportunity. If you ever wanted to get knowledge to empower yourselves, this is the place to do it. The courses are $160. You can pay a monthly installment, but it's full on biology with Dr. Jack. Bio 1 and Bio 2 are going to form the basis of these other courses, so they're prerequisite. But we have, oh my gosh, we have courses on the nutrition, the biology of nutrition. We have courses on uh, genetics coming up. Okay, we have so many good courses that people are going to want to take. We're going to add an immunology course for sure. Um, the some of the exciting courses are like environmental toxicology. We have Ashley Evers who's going to be teaching environmental toxicology. Uh, Organismal biology, environmental biology, ecology, evolution, and molecular biology, bioinformatics, environmental toxicology. We're not waiting around. We're not going to sit and hope that someday the king is going to say, you know what, you guys are right. I'm running my
Hmm.
kingdom wrong. So we
Right.
have to replace it. We have to build our own infrastructure. We have to build our own society. People have to stop waiting for the people at the top to do the right things and just build it ourselves.
I absolutely agree. That's exciting. You're making me want to go back to school.
Well, I hope to see you in class. So
I'm a front row student, so, you know,
wonderful.
hopefully that gives me an edge. But so this has been a very fascinating discussion. I really appreciate you having me on your show since we were having so much trouble getting you onto mine. You're just so in demand right now. Everybody wants you. You got a lot of stuff going on. Is there anything else that you're doing that peeps should know about?
No, we have a lot more in the works that I'm not going to get into. We tend to roll things out after they have, become firmed up. But here's what I want to say. We have a short window of opportunity here to educate other people. I have something like 240 articles on my blog, jameslyons-weiler.com, and reaching over 1.1 million readers. And so, if you are looking for solid information, go to the IPAC website, go to jameslyons-weiler.com, and of course, support the science that we're doing. We have other papers that are coming to the journal Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law by other scientists. Okay, they're under peer review right now. So we're building the infrastructure that we need to be able to stand on a firm footing. And this is how it's done. We can complain all day long. We can say how we can catch people doing bad things all day long. But unless there's a viable alternative, we're not going to see any improvement in society. So while everybody's focused on the election, while everybody's focused on COVID-19, here's IPAC building it for you. So I hope you guys join the IPAC
Mhm.
family. You can support us with a small monthly donation at ipaknowledge.org. Um, but first, give to the Hathaway and Rakes. Okay, please go to that tiny URL /baby rakes and help that family out first. It's really important that we send them some love. So, Tia, I want to thank you so much for having me on your interview of me on Unbreaking Science.
Can you do me a favor before we say goodbye?
Yeah, what's that?
Can you pull up uimedianetwork.org and
Sure.
just scroll down and show folks that they can go to uimedianetwork.org, and that is one of the places that you can see The People's Truth, which goes out live every other Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern. We also simulcast on We Are Vaxxed and on Vaxxed TV on YouTube. But if you wouldn't mind, show the peeps where they can go for UI Media Network so that they can check out the show. And I will be featuring some of this interview in my show next week as well. as if you scroll, I think if you scroll down, you'll see down below there's a list of the different shows that are on. There's a bunch of different shows that are on UI Media Network.
Nice.
And so I've just joined their team, and I brought the Vaxxed brand over with me. So it's kind of
Oh, there you are.
it's a collaborative effort here to
Great.
get the word out. And I'm going to be also, this is really exciting. I'm going to be announcing it here on behalf of Erica Lynn Geyser, who is also known as Nokomis in the hip hop world.
Yep.
She's going to be debuting her video for Unbreaking Science, the song that she wrote for
Oh,
your
wow.
show. So
That's
we're going to be
awesome.
featuring that.
That's really cool. Hey, let's see if we can listen to
Yeah.
this together. I know she did some modifications to it, but let's see if I can merge it. Let's see.
Hi everyone, I'm your host, Dr. James Lyons-Weiler, aka Dr. Jack. In this episode, we're going to review the evidence that science is broken. This is not a news story.
Will be told, the people will know the price
it's
of
quite
corporate
telling.
science really taking its toll. Whistleblowers blow, public health at a low. They say the science is settled, but how do they know?
Unbreaking science.
Ask questions quickly, think you should try it. It's pure, unadulterated science. Unbreaking science.
Unbreaking science.
Yeah.
You can't deny it, and you sure can't buy it. Fact check, use your brain, don't be quiet.
So where's she releasing it, you know?
Well, the big debut is going to be on my show next week.
Oh, that's exciting.
So I know that you're going to be unfortunately tied up with the HPV conference, but you'll have to check it out when you get a free minute after you're done with that. Do you want to talk about the HPV conference
Yeah, there's
at
an
all?
HPV conference in Ohio. The best place to go there is Ohio Medical Freedom, OMF. Find them on Facebook.
Oh,
And
love Stephanie.
yeah,
Hi,
some
Stephanie.
great people
Love
in
you.
Ohio. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yep. So the Ohio
Fantastic.
Medical Freedom Group is doing this, and you can probably still get tickets. I think there's still some tickets left, but anyway, it's going to be a huge success. Obviously, I mean, this is what you asked if there are other things going on. I have an entire body of science on HPV, type replacement, and all the rest. So there's a lot of things that are coming. So down the pike, and Tia, you're an angel for bringing it to us, and I'm going to be thinking about Baby Rakes and Hathaway and the Rakes family tonight, and I hope everybody can just do a little bit for them, uh, do as much as you possibly can, because they
Yes,
need to know that they're surrounded by a loving community, and
absolutely.
I want to thank you for bringing our attention to it.
I want to put out my email address, which is tiaseverino@gmail.com, in case there's anybody out there that knows any resources that could help the family. Go ahead and I'm not real good with email, but I will check it. I will check it specifically because I know that there might be some emails coming in. So it's just my name, Tia Severino. I'll put it in the email in the comments here.
There you go.
If if you've heard this story and you think of anything helpful, please let me know, and I'll pass the information along. Luckily, like I said, fortunately, and it's very unfortunate that the baby passed away, but it's a good thing that I was able to get word of this the day that it happened, so we could
Yeah,
give the family some
yeah.
good direction and some good advice.
Well, some people call me a thought leader in this vaccine risk awareness. I think we need to walk away from the vaccine injury compensation program. We don't need to abolish it. We don't need to do anything like that. We just need to stop using it. And that's my advice, not on a legal basis, but on a moral basis. Being that I
Right.
was in fact bribed by they unsuccessfully attempted to bribe me, I should say. There was an attempted,
That's
right?
Isn't that a criminal offense? Did you report it?
I've been looking for a whistleblower attorney. Obviously, if I got sucked into a big lawsuit like that, that would take up a lot of my time. But
Right.
I can tell you very briefly what happened was I put it forward some aluminum-based reasoning, and the special master was caught on video saying that they'll compensate Dr. Lyons-Weiler up to this point in time, but they're unlikely to compensate me again in the future unless they like my testimony, because the courts had
Whoa.
already found that aluminum is not a problem. I'm like,
Have you got him on record saying this?
yes, we have a recording of it, and the lawyer, for other reasons, has been disbarred at this point. So I think they're definitely burning bridges to try to hide that up. Because I let it, when I the case was
Wow.
dismissed after when you're an expert in this program, you have to write what you examined. I examined the autopsy records. I examined, the statements of the doctors. I examined this, the testimony of the parents or whatever. Well, I put in there, I
Mhm.
examined the recording of the special master, and this is what the special master said. I put it in writing, so it's part of the NVICP documentation. It's in there. If the
Mhm.
lawyer actually submitted it, so the lawyer's been disbarred for other reasons, but it's not a good program whatsoever.
Wow.
We need to walk away from things that don't work.
Right. Well, I don't know. I'm still advising the family to, at least file a VAERS report. But I mean,
Definitely,
all of this, for the first thing that they really need to do, and why this fundraiser is so important is to get the private autopsy,
yeah,
because there's other factors at play here. There's also the MRI that was performed on the baby,
yeah.
which
That doesn't
this
make
could also be a contributing factor in the baby's death. And I think I'm not making any kind of predictions about whether it'll go legally, but I mean, to me, and this is my opinion,
yeah.
it sounds like possible medical malpractice case against the hospital. Again,
Hmm.
I'm not making any predictions. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving any legal perspective on it, but
That's right.
that's what it sounds like to me as a layperson. So they need to get this private autopsy done, because we know that the coroner is probably not going to look well. Well, I mean, in Sid's death, they don't look for any other cause except for parental abuse, or some other. They look for signs of trauma or
Yeah.
abuse.
I've been
And
on cases in the vaccine injury court. They always deny them, right? Because
right,
right. So if
right.
we end up if the hope is that we're going to somehow, by winning a case, set precedent so it makes it so that other people can win, you can't
There's no
cite
precedence.
precedent. You can't cite
No.
precedent, and it took them 30 years to get Guillain-Barré syndrome on the table. So they were paralyzing people with the flu vaccine for 30 years before they went, oh,
Right.
look, we're paralyzing people with flu vaccine. So no,
Hmm.
absolutely no, no, no. For me,
Right.
what I would do is get the autopsy for all these reasons and everything else. Definitely, people should submit their vaccine injury information to VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. There's no statute of limitations. You can report to VAERS anytime. You need to
Right.
file for, if you're going to go to vaccine court, you need to file within 3 years or something like that. But
Right.
people can go back 20 years later and file their vaccine injury. I would
Right.
encourage everybody to do that. But no, we have a corrupted bot system uh,
Right.
protecting. Now, get this: the Department of Health and Human Services is the other litigant. They're the defendant,
Right.
but they administer the program. I would like to be a defendant where I committed a crime and I get to tell the judges what they can and cannot do. Right? That's
Right.
what's
What a
happening.
great setup.
Isn't that a great
What a
setup?
great
This is
setup.
a
Right.
fantastic setup. So
Man.
it's just wrong. It's just not fair. And I want to thank you for bringing we want to help the baby rakes, situation. We want to help the Hathaways and rakes. And I send them a lot of love, and just do whatever you can do. This is going to, in my advice is their time is much better spent surrounding themselves with people that love them and helping other
Right.
people avoid the same
Right.
outcome, for sure.
Right. Right. So, Pete, send them love. Maybe you can't contribute financially to the fundraiser, but you can leave a message of support and love in the comment section on that fundraiser. You can share the fundraiser. You can share this live stream, this episode of Unbreaking Science, but get the word out about this beautiful, beautiful. Look at how beautiful she is, and just this precious little child that had her entire life ahead of her and only got to spend days on this planet, most of those being spent in a hospital being poked and prodded. So I know how wonderful our community is, and I know how much love is in the hearts of the peeps out there. So please send love, share the fundraiser, donate if you can, and send any information that you have my way.
Right on. Okay, listen, I'm going to
Thank
put your
you.
email up there one more time, tiaseverino@gmail.com. Tia, you're a great
All right.
hostess for Unbreaking Science. Thank you. We thank you here
Thank
at
you.
WWDNYK Studios, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
All right. Well, I love you, Jack. Take care.
Love you
Be
too. Take
good.
care.
Bye.
So this is how it's done, peeps. You put all your heart and soul into something, and you spend your time. We have the Vaxxed on Vax study, the third aluminum study, IPAC EDU, where you can get your courses. You go to ipac-edu.org. It's done by addressing the testing problems. It's done by bringing forward the treatment in real time. If I think about everything that we've accomplished just over the past 8 months in real time in response to coronavirus, it's a little daunting. So I do it because of families like yours. I do it because of babies like Baby Rakes, and I'm just honored to be trusted by the community to be objective in all that I do. It's the only way I know how to roll. Dr. James Lyons-Weiler signing off. Thank you for being part of this Unbreaking Science experience. We will see you next time.